Imagine spending your entire life trying to be understood. You explain your decisions. You explain your intentions. You explain your boundaries. You explain your dreams. You explain why you left, why you stayed, why you changed, why you failed, why you succeeded. And still, people misunderstand you. Some criticize you. Some judge you. Some invent stories about who you are. Some decide they know you better than you know yourself. The harder you try to explain yourself, the more exhausted you become. Because there is a painful truth hidden beneath human relationships. Not everyone wants to understand you. Some only want confirmation of what they already believe. And this is where one of the most powerful psychological insights associated with Carl Jung begins. The need to constantly explain yourself is often not a communication problem. It is an identity problem, a problem rooted in approval, fear, rejection, and the desperate desire to control how others see us. Tonight we explore why Jung believed psychological freedom begins the moment you stop trying to convince everyone. Because the people who truly understand you rarely require endless explanations, and the people demanding them may never understand you anyway. Human beings are social creatures. For thousands of years, belonging meant survival. Exclusion could mean death. Your tribe protected you. Your community gave you identity. Your social standing determined your future. As a result, our brains evolved to care deeply about what others think, much more deeply than we realize. Every criticism feels threatening. Every rejection feels personal. Every misunderstanding feels like danger. This ancient survival mechanism still operates inside modern humans. But today's world has amplified it. Social media encourages constant self-presentation. Everyone becomes their own public relations department. Every opinion is scrutinized. Every action is evaluated. Every mistake is documented. People feel pressured to explain everything. Why they posted something. Why they didn't. Why they changed careers. Why they ended a relationship. Why they moved away. Why they set boundaries. Why they chose themselves. Slowly, explanation becomes a lifestyle, and eventually a prison. Because once you become dependent on approval, your identity no longer belongs to you. Because once you become dependent on approval, your identity no longer belongs to you. It belongs to your audience. Jung believed that much of human behavior is driven by unconscious forces. For him, the conscious personality represented only a small fraction of who we truly are. Beneath awareness lies a vast psychological landscape. One of Jung's most famous concepts was the persona. The persona is the social mask, the version of ourselves we present to the world. It helps us function in society. But problems begin when we become identified with it, when the persona becomes more important than the self. A person obsessed with explaining themselves is often protecting their persona. They're trying to maintain a specific image, a specific reputation, a specific story. They want others to see them correctly. But this creates endless suffering, because every human being interprets reality differently. No matter how clearly you explain yourself, people filter your words through their own experiences, their fears, their biases, their wounds, their expectations. You cannot control that process, and yet millions spend their lives trying. Jung would argue that this is a battle that cannot be won, because perception is never fully under your control. Another revolutionary idea from Jung was the shadow. The shadow contains aspects of ourselves we reject, traits we hide, emotions we suppress, impulses we fear, weaknesses we deny. Most people think they explain themselves to gain understanding, but often they explain themselves to avoid judgment, and judgment threatens the parts of themselves they secretly doubt. Imagine someone setting a healthy boundary. Instead of simply saying no, they provide a 20-minute justification. Why? Because part of them fears being seen as selfish. That fear belongs to the shadow. The explanation becomes an attempt to escape discomfort. But true psychological growth requires facing discomfort, not avoiding it. The more integrated your shadow becomes, the less you need approval. The less approval you need, the less explanation becomes necessary. Many people mistake explanation for communication, but often it is validation seeking. There is a subtle difference. Communication shares information. Validation seeks permission. One says, "This is my decision." The other says, "Please tell me my decision is acceptable." This distinction changes everything. Because when your emotional stability depends on external agreement, you become vulnerable to manipulation. Anyone can control you by withholding approval. Anyone can influence your behavior through criticism. Anyone can shape your identity through judgment. And this is precisely why learning to tolerate misunderstanding becomes a form of psychological power. Throughout history, many influential individuals were deeply misunderstood. Socrates was condemned. Galileo Galilei was ridiculed. Nikola Tesla was dismissed by many contemporaries. Their explanations did not eliminate opposition, because opposition was never based entirely on evidence. Human beings often resist ideas that challenge identity. Facts alone rarely overcome psychological resistance. The same dynamic appears in everyday life. People do not merely evaluate your actions. They evaluate what your actions mean to them. Your success may threaten someone else's insecurity. Your boundary may challenge someone else's expectations. Your independence may expose someone else's dependence. In such cases, explanations rarely solve the problem, because the real conflict exists beneath the surface. Today, this issue has reached unprecedented levels. We live in the age of permanent visibility. Everyone is watching. Everyone is commenting. Everyone is judging. Or at least it feels that way. People spend hours crafting responses, defending themselves online, arguing with strangers, trying to correct misunderstandings, trying to win approval, trying to manage perception. But perception management is endless. For every person who understands you, another misunderstands you. For every supporter, another critic appears. The cycle never ends. And eventually, people discover a surprising truth. The more energy they spend controlling perception, the less energy they have for living. The pursuit of understanding begins to replace authentic existence. One of the deepest human fears is being misunderstood. Why? Because misunderstanding feels like invisibility. It feels as though the real self has disappeared. But Jung suggested something profound. The goal is not universal understanding. The goal is individuation. Individuation is becoming who you truly are, not who others expect, not who society rewards, not who your family demands, who you genuinely are. And individuation often requires disappointing people. It requires misunderstanding. It requires criticism. Because authenticity inevitably conflicts with expectations. So what is the alternative? Silence. Not passive silence. Not fearful silence. Intentional silence. The silence of self-possession. The silence that emerges when your identity no longer depends on consensus. This does not mean never explaining yourself. Healthy communication remains important. Clarification remains important. Honesty remains important. But there is a difference between explaining once and explaining endlessly. One seeks understanding, the other seeks approval. The mature individual learns to recognize the difference.